Are you enjoying yourselves in Kigali? Very well? So let me tell you something about this city of ours. Every day has a theme. And that theme begins with the first letter of that day. So if it is Monday, the definition of Monday starts with that first letter, which is M. So the way we have Lendi Mesha, we have Mad Monday. So Tuesday, yesterday, was Terrific Tuesday. Now I want to start warning you, when you start moving from Wednesday onwards, it starts becoming very interesting, especially for you microfinance people. So today, Wednesday, is Wonderful Wednesday. Tomorrow, Thursday, will be Thirsty Thursday. Now, Friday is very serious. It is funky, it is fabulous, it is fantastic Friday. If you'll still be here on Saturday, it will be super, it will be special, it will be serious Saturday. Now, after all that, you get to the Sunday, and then it's a slow Sunday, and then you start the Mad Monday again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to day 2 of the SAM conference. My job is very easy. I will start with a bit of housekeeping for purposes of very, very specific reminders. Today from 11 o'clock, we will have the PCR tests begin. And those are the tests that you will need for those who intend to start traveling back from Friday onwards. So the PCR tests are being taken, the area where we picked our badges, you'll see right behind there. Those who did rapid tests before you came into the meetings, it's in the same area. And our ushers and protocol staff will be able to guide you to where they're being taken in case you struggle to find that. The cost of the test is only $50. Yesterday we did have some challenges, a few technical glitches that we have managed to fix with our virtual people participating virtually, especially the speakers. All inconveniences are highly regretted. But for those of you who will put up your hands to make any question, to make any comment or ask any question, I will kindly request you to to either switch off your earpieces or remove them, because we get a feedback when you're speaking through the microphone and you have your translation set on. So if you're using the microphone either with a question or a comment, either turn off your earpiece or remove it. Just remind you about that. Yesterday we were trending very, very highly on Twitter. Our hashtag is SAM2021. That's hashtag SAM 2021. Thank you for those of you who have been tweeting since yesterday and posting. Kindly post using that hashtag. Finally, I didn't know that microfinance people can be very photogenic. There are very nice pictures of you guys on the SAM website. I'll encourage you to go there. You go to the media section and look how amazing you guys looked yesterday and will continue to look today. My second role after the housekeeping is to do a fairly quick recap of how our day went yesterday. And for those of you, especially for those of you who are not here and those of you who are in different parallel sessions, we set the ball rolling with a moment of silence from Laura in remembrance of people we lost in our fraternity during the COVID-19 pandemic. We then had a session with the WHO and FDB chiefs of Rwanda, where we looked at the different global challenges and the lessons learned. Vaccinations, we got a reassurance that the vaccines are safe. We're reminded about the importance of SOPs and or that all of us as stakeholders still have a role to play in ensuring we keep our eyes on the ball. Vaccines for Africa, vaccines production in Africa still remains a challenge, but we did get some comfort that the projects have started in 3 pilot countries, being Rwanda, Senegal, and South Africa. There were concerns around half of the world's population still being under 18 and still facing poverty. And there's still some work to be done to curb SDG number 1, which is around poverty. We did see that the role of the Africa Development Bank in as far as the growth of microfinance institutions is still very central. MFIs were reminded of their key roles in addressing challenges of climate change and the importance that all of us in the room and all the other stakeholders need to address issues to do with conflict as they are cross-cutting. We did hear that resilience is one of the key drivers of success, and that was by Renee. She did give us a very, very insightful presentation. Just to bring to your attention that during the course of the morning, we had an MOU signed between the government of Rwanda and the government of Luxembourg, and amongst other things that will benefit not only Rwanda, but all African countries and even other foreign investors, is around supporting the Kigali International Finance Center, which will be a model of financial excellence on the continent. We broke away into parallel sessions, very, very exciting sessions. The need for disruptive finance, for structured changes to occur in the microfinance sector, and digital inclusion being an endless pit. It's not enough to say that I have digitized my operations, therefore I've finished my business. No, innovation is a continuous process. Yes, there was a general consensus that some of these softwares that we run are expensive, but we also noted that it is a necessary evil. There's no way we can run away from digitization of the MFI sector. And the role of ADA in supporting this digitization journey was really underscored. The importance of involving the vulnerable poor in terms of an inclusive approach towards climate change issues, and the points that were being raised here in the sessions were predominantly around making sure that you're not imposing against the vulnerable communities that this is what you must do, you should not cut trees, but involve them in how they can use their firewood in a more sustainable way. There's an interesting survey that was revealed on how COVID-19 has affected MFIs and other vulnerable poor, and the resilience of our people was really the highlight of that. The other highlight of that survey was that some of the incentives that were given to microfinance institutions did not really trickle down onto the beneficiaries of the loans, and there's still some work to be done in that space. Digital value chain, especially in the agriculture sector, was one of the things that created quite a bit of debate. And the general consensus on that one is that if it works for one country, it does not necessarily work for another. So it is very, very market specific. We had some interesting ideas being shared around insurance, agricultural insurance, and how that is very specific from one country to another. And there was very interesting conversations around there. Finally, we did have a very interesting conversation around not wanting to copy and paste what has happened in one country and thinking it can work for your country. And the emphasis underscored was the importance of doing your own feasibility study for your own specific market to understand that what works in Ethiopia may not necessarily work in Gabon, and so on and so forth. So thank you so much, guys, for the sessions yesterday. They were very, very vibrant, a lot of interactive ideas and very candid sharing of whatever we're doing in our respective microfinance spaces. Now, without further ado, I'd like to announce the first session of day 2, where it's a conversation around post-crisis Reconstruction, a session that is talking about reducing inequalities and strengthening the resilience of women. Who wouldn't like to listen to a conversation about women and finance? After all, they are the ones who manage our finances at home and in the world. No better person to take us through this than Madame Mariam Esther Dassanou, who's a champion of affirmative finance action for women in Africa. She runs an organization called AFAWA, that's the acronym, and she's with the African Development Bank in Cote d'Ivoire. As Esther makes her way up, I'd like to remind you that she has an initiative that has reduced significantly the gap of women in financing, and she will take us through a lot of that. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Madame Esther. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, good morning. And before I go into my keynote remarks today, I'd like to piggyback off of what Charles just said. So today being Wednesday, wonderful Wednesday, it is actually also Wealthy Wednesday. We're finance people in the room, and I think there's nothing wrong with liking and pushing and growing money. So today, I am very privileged to be amongst you to discuss about the resilience, the growth, and the opportunity that the women's market presents for us, especially as we rebuild our continent from the effects of the pandemic. Wherever we find ourselves on the continent, we say and we believe that women are the backbone of our African economies. From trade to agriculture, manufacturing, and health, they are not only active, but in times of crisis, are the first ones to actually show resilience and find ways to reinvent themselves. The African continent is also home to the largest percentage of self-employed women. 58%, says the World Bank. However, as much as they are the highest in self-starting enterprises, they are also 34% less profitable than their male counterparts. As much as African women SMEs are so active on the continent, we fail to see the impact of their contribution on the growth of our economies. A recent study conducted by the African Development Bank shows that women are heavily represented in the informal sector and in the micro sector. Some way, somehow, women have remained stuck in the micro sector and have not transitioned. While 11.8 million of women are enterprises on the continent, and this, by the way, is on a study that was conducted over 16 markets in Africa, we find that only 2 million are formal, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, which means that something like 9.8 million remain informal and unseen. And the interesting thing is that these 9.8 million are ideally members and clients of microfinance institutions. Of the 2 million, less than 500,000 are actually formal enterprises. The issue with this is that research has told us over and over again that employment are actually generated by small and medium-sized enterprises. Therefore, let me ask you a question. If we're not scaling women from micro to small and medium-sized, how do we expect to create the jobs that our continent so direly needs? So the question is, why are women so heavily represented in the informal sector? The answer, they lack access. They lack access to the right types of financial services to help them grow. They lack access to the skills and knowledge needed to run an efficient, sustainable, and profitable business. They lack access to an enabling environment with the right types of policies and enablers to help them in their growth. They lack access to technology to increase their efficiency and their visibility. They also lack access to the right types of risk and mitigation tools to increase their resilience. And finally, they lack access to the right networks and the right role models to support them along the way. The lack of access in all these areas has actually forced them to operate in the informal sector and to remain invisible. It has also caused them to be perceived as more risky, and because they are perceived as more risky, they fail to access the financing that they need. Having said that, I think microfinance is actually the way forward and has a huge role to play. The microfinance sector has enabled women who once could not access loans to be able to do so by opening bank accounts at your level, by accessing small digital finance loans at your level, which is a good start, but it's not enough. There has been very little transition and growth, especially for micro entrepreneurs, who, although have grown, some way, somehow, as I have said earlier, remain stuck in the microfinance sector. We need to see a transition. So, what needs to change? Microfinance institutions, just like Tier 1 and Tier 2 banks, should also start disaggregating their data. There are a lot of women in the microfinance sector. As a matter of fact, microfinance has the face of a woman. But what kind of women are we talking about? Women are not a homogeneous group. They have different needs, they face different realities, and as they move from one level to another, face also different risks. Thus, it is important, one, to ensure that just like we're asking commercial banks today to disaggregate their data, that microfinance institutions also disaggregate their data. The second thing is, once they have disaggregated their data, it's time to innovate. What are the products that women need in order for them to transition? What are the training, the knowledge, the information that they need to access in order for them to grow? It is also important to further leverage digital technology to support women micro-entrepreneurs. As I said earlier, digital finance, especially at the micro level, has enabled women to access some form of financing, but it remains too low. $50, $100, $250, $1,000, great, but not enough to make the impact that we're actually looking for. It is also important to help women entrepreneurs and women micro-enterprises more specifically in knowing how to better mitigate risk by going above the health and agri-insurance that we're seeing being developed at your level. It is good, but it can go further. Today, when we look at the financial sector, about 30%, if not less, of financial institutions have very specific programs for women entrepreneurs. This includes the micro and definitely at the SME level. We need to see more. They need to multiply if we expect women at all levels, whether micro, small, and medium size, to play the economic role that we're wanting them to play. How does AFAWA help? The African Development Bank developed the Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa to respond to the $42 billion gap in access to finance that exists for women entrepreneurs on the continent. The way in which we do it is by focusing on three pillars. The first one is access to finance, making sure that the financing is available at the level of financial institutions. This includes micro, meso, and of course at commercial bank level. Through investments that are lines of credit, trade finance, and equity investment, we ensure that financial institutions have the liquidity to be able to lend to women. We also have recently developed a guarantee mechanism. This guarantee mechanism enables us to basically accompany you, financial institutions, in taking the risk towards women entrepreneurs in a more comfortable manner. And the reason why we do so and are willing to even go further and cover anywhere from 50 to 75% of the losses you might, right, face is because we know that women are not only a profitable market, but that they're a less risky market. And as a matter of fact, we learned it from you, microfinanciers. Women repay their loans. You told us. We heard, and therefore are willing to take the risk. The second pillar is the technical assistance to accompany both you as well as the women entrepreneurs you serve in acquiring the skills, the data, and the information that you need in order to create the right types of products to ensure that women are transitioning from the informal to the formal, from micro to small and medium size. We also want to make sure that women entrepreneurs have a better understanding of the financial sector. And this is where we have an opportunity to innovate with you. The last pillar is the enabling environment. We cannot work in an environment that is not conducive for women enterprises to grow. So we want to make sure, working alongside governments, that the policies and the regulations that are in place are actually conducive to enabling women to access. This entails looking at land titling, because collateral remains our most interesting way of securing loans. It also looks at facilitating collateral flexibility for you so that we can innovate around that area. It also looks like at enablers, so basically the women business associations that you would work with to capacitate them not only to work alongside you, but to also work alongside the women so that they can grow. And finally, it looks at encouraging the transition from the informal to the formal sector. And here, we're also keen on looking at innovative ways to do so with you. So, in closing, what I would like to say is that the women's market is not only a viable and a vital market for our continent, but it is also a profitable one. And there is nothing wrong to say that we are in it for profit. If it wasn't profitable, we would not do it. The social is good and is important, but the profitability of it is equally important. But in order for us to remain profitable, we need to ensure that we're tapping in the profitable market, which is the women's market. And you, as microfinancier, have seen it. However, this will warrant us working together. It will warrant collaboration between microfinance institutions, mesofinance institutions, and commercial banks. It will warrant collaboration between governments, enablers, and the women themselves because they have a role to play and should be at the table. If we want to unleash women's full potential for the sustainable rebuilding of our continent, we need to take all these things into account. Enabling women is ensuring our growth, but supporting and accelerating their growth is also catapulting the development and economic growth of our continent. In the words of my own president, Dr. Adesina, when women win, Africa wins. So let's do this all together. Thank you.
Very, very exciting from Madame Esther. Just before we open up to the floor for any questions and comments, I'll request that if there are any, you'll just put up your hand and the ushers will come to you. But maybe I'll start with myself and ask that in this amazing journey, what has been some of the biggest challenges that you have faced that you'd like to share with the audience and you think that could be better, both from a COVID-19 perspective and also from a microfinance perspective?
Thank you so much, Charles. So I would say during the COVID pandemic, we actually saw that women were the most impacted. In some cases, because of the roles that they play, they were the first one to have to close their businesses because their presence was needed at home. They lost employees just like everyone else, but they lost them faster than anyone else. Accessing financing, even though it was hard before, became even harder because of the perceived risk that they present. However, as much as we saw that, we also saw a lot of innovation coming from women entrepreneurs. Very quickly, they pivoted. They understood that if they were to survive, they actually needed to be in the digital space. So those of them who quickly understood that were the ones who actually survived during the pandemic. We also saw women who were doing cross-border trading, especially in the agriculture space, being stuck, losing their goods because they no longer could go from one border to another. However, here we also saw quick pivoting. Women started delivering food. Women started working together at the border level to almost do what a DHL does, actually, interestingly enough. And so there's a lot, I think, to learn from this and also to take into account as we look to develop products and financial services, if I can say, that are more customized to the realities that women face.
Thank you so much.
You.
We do have time for questions and comments. There's a gentleman up there. Take the mic up to him.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the presentation. My name is Al-Khidr Al-Amin Muhammad. I'm from Sudan, and I have a question about the rural woman, because when we talk about the issue of entrepreneurship, we see that we are focusing on the urban entrepreneurs. I mean the graduates. And as you know, in a country like Sudan, there are a lot of, cultural barriers that can stop any efforts to achieve impact in, accelerating women finance and facilitating access to finance. And I want to know, how can we perform accelerating women entrepreneurship and access to finance project without making some preparedness program, like raising the awareness of rural people in some communities that are not accepting the issue of, the issue of accessing to finance for women, especially in a country like Sudan. And you know that 80% of the GDP of a country like Sudan came from rural areas. So before implementing any financing project, we have to consider this factor, and we have to put a program, you know, to include or to raise awareness of local communities to enable rural women to have an easy access to finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll take probably two more. Mariam, here's a very good one. There's a gentleman here.
Bonjour, merci. Moi, je suis Monsieur Adama Kamara, directeur d'une institution de microfinance au Mali avec 200 000 clients, dont 90% des femmes. Pour dire que nous avons notre petite expérience dans le financement des femmes. Mais nous sommes confrontés à un défi. C'est comment préparer surtout les femmes rurales, comme mon collègue de Soudan vient de le dire, à recevoir les financements, à les utiliser de façon judicieuse et à pouvoir améliorer leurs conditions de vie. Surtout qu'au début, c'est des petits prêts dont la rentabilité n'est pas évidente. Comment concilier cela avec actuellement les coûts des ressources sur le marché financier? Nos expériences nous montrent que nous obtenons des ressources entre 7 et 8% en termes d'achat, si on peut le dire, et en termes de taux de sortie, naturellement, pour être rentable, nous sommes obligés d'ajouter notre petite marge. Première question. Deuxième question, ce fonds, c'est AFAWA que j'ai noté. Comment y accéder? Quelle procédure? Quel mécanisme? Et à qui il faut s'adresser? Merci.
Yes, we'll take someone there in the middle. Two more, just, yeah, right there, and then at the very end, the other side. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I am Bison Ben Ayuk from the Ministry of Finance, Cameroon, in charge of microfinance promotion, regulation, and monitoring. You talked about collateral flexibility. I want to say most often we insist on what the financial providers or microfinance institutions should do to foster access to finance for women. But we do not take into consideration the fact that the policies laid down by the supervisor or the regulator is not gender sensitive, it's risk sensitive. So how do we establish a trade-off between fostering access finance for women and bringing the supervisor or the regulator into an economy that sustains such possibilities with respect to women? That's the first question. The second question has to do with what is your take on social capital? How do we factor in social capital as an element that can mitigate the absence of collateral? In your experiences, how have you been able to establish a pattern that can enable social capital to be considered as an element whereby microfinance institutions can lay hold of it and be able to see how women can access finance beyond what they have been able to do so far? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those. We'll just take only one more. There's a gentleman at the end there. And then Mariam will respond to those, and if time allows, we'll take a few more. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Eric from Caritas, Kenya. You said that 82% of women in Africa are in informal sector. One of the reasons why this is happening is because our women really want to be free. They don't want to be so much controlled. You find that when you try to formalize them, sometimes their social aspect is affected. So the question is, how do we strike a balance between formalizing the MSME within the African women, and at the same time ensuring that their original vision, mission is not interfered with. Thank you.
We'll take those, Mariam, and then.
Thank you very much. Let me start with the women in the rural sector and how do we ensure that they're included. I think the first starting point is really to understand the structure of the women's segment that we're talking about and to customize it to the realities that they're facing. As I said earlier, the women's market is definitely not a homogeneous one. In the rural area, what we find is very often that the sector in which women are engaged in is the agri-sector. Women operate in cooperatives. However, those cooperatives, some way, somehow, do not have the right structure today to yield the type of financing that is required. And I think we ought to think about that. And there's great opportunity, and we're definitely, I want to say, open at the African Development Bank to be able to look at these innovative ways and pilot. I think there is also a need to take the cultural context into account. There's a bit of need also for education at that level to ensure that the financing mechanisms that we're putting in place are working for the women's market that we're trying to target. Looking at the cooperative model in this particular case and finding ways to, for a lack of a better word, formalize it in order to enhance the success, if you will, and the results for women at that level would be one starting point. Women are lending to each other. Even if, the cultural context make it difficult, they are lending to each other. What can we actually leverage from that in order to help them grow and also educate the rest of the population in the role that they play in the growth of a given economy? And I think that also addresses the question of the rural area in general. Now, in terms of AFAWA, how to access, you contact the African Development Bank. You'll contact the African Development Bank either in your country, so in this case, Cameroon, or you can also see me at the end of the session, and I'll be glad to give you my contact so that we can discuss it further. Collateral flexibility and what the regulators are doing. I could not agree more. Regulators are risk sensitive, but today we're working with them so that they become also gender sensitive. It's really critical, to your point, because if we don't see the intersection between the role that women play, the risks that they face, and how to mitigate them, it'll be very difficult for financiers like us to do what it is that they are supposed to do. So we've started working with a few governments on reviewing even their financial inclusion strategies and figuring out how to ensure that the financial inclusion strategies are truly gender sensitive, that they take into account the realities of women. My take on social risk is that indeed it could be an alternative collateral, or at least something to enhance, if you will, the collateral that women are able to provide. However, today I think we're seeing just bits and pieces, right, of these types of endeavors, and it's very difficult at this point to really say what the results have been. And I think it warrants studying it a little bit, and also piloting in an innovative manner to see how these types of, if you will, how these types of combinations can actually be applied, of course, throughout the continent and with different financial institutions. I really like the questions of 82% of women being in the informal sector. However, how do we strike a balance? So this is the thing. As long as women remain in the informal sector, they remain unseen. And the capital that is being put into our hands is actually formal capital. Whichever way you look at it, unless you're formal, it's very difficult for you to access the level of financing that you need to access. Now, does that mean that you lose your social construct? No. It is up to us to figure out ways in which we customize it, but without losing the formality of it. As long as they remain informal, the level of financing is small. So we can't expect them to really grow, and I think there is a bit of education that's needed at that level too, because it's a perception, right? They think they will be come after for taxes, for example. But what they don't know is that they're already involved in the tax-paying system. They're in the markets. They pay a market tax, right? So I think there is a bit of education and of accompanying the women at that level too, so that they understand what is the business case for them to become formal, to be formal, and to enable them to grow in the long run, if that's what they choose, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was wondering why only men are asking questions that are pertinent to women affairs. And in the remaining 2 minutes, I'll probably take a comment or two from a lady. A lady? I said a lady, sir? Where? Oh, yes, right there in the middle. Yes, thanks. Thank you.
I am Tancho Beatrice from Cameroon, Sonara Workers Cooperative Credit Union, a microfinance institution. My concern is more maybe like a comment than a question, which is about the sensitization of women in the rural sector. Because we see that most women are not at all involved with this finance, and I believe that it's an issue of lack of education in Africa. Because as I work in the field, I've noticed that most of the times when you approach women and talk about loans, they feel always that it's a male issue, doesn't concern them. They don't see how they can easily grow through loans. So I think that at all levels, we need a lot of education and sensitization, because the women, they carry the mass, and I think that if they are educated enough, Africa will grow more. So it's some sort of an inclusive something. We need so much education to those women. So that's the thing I just wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We could take probably the last one. If I could get a microphone up here at the very top. If you could make your way up fairly quickly to the very top there. And as that makes, I think, Mariam, that the comment from the lady from Cameroon is very related to what the gentleman from Sudan said in regards to culture and cultural challenges that we may have. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Esther Dassanou. I'm a practitioner from Zimbabwe. So for me, I'm thinking the issue of going digital, especially for women living under the poverty bottom line, it's an issue that we cannot convince them that it's better than cash. And my question to you is that, what do you think about subsidizing, especially this digital platform, in a manner to offset pricing so that it influences the decision of women to be able to be served digitally? Thank you.
I think the gentleman from Mali also said something along that. Incentives. Yes, thanks.
So thanks. The first thing I want to say is I completely agree with you. There is no way that we can talk about financial inclusion and access to finance for women, especially women at rural level, if we're not educating them. It's true that some way, somehow, finance has been, caricatured as with a man's face. So finance is not the things that women deal with. However, it has to be. And so bringing the education down to that level, to the very basic, I think is critical. Women intuitively save, right? So if women can intuitively save, they can also understand what it means to take a loan, what it means to take a risk. And by the way, I have to say this is not only a rural issue, it's across the board, right? Women at the small and medium enterprise level also do the same thing. Some way, somehow, they are scared of or risk averse, let's say, when it comes to financing, and that needs to change. In terms of digital finance and the incentive, I think it's also linked some way, somehow to the education, but also to how we customize the products that we give to women. Getting them to use the digital financial services cannot only be about money. It has to give them something else. And perhaps this is the way whereby we ought to teach them. What is the information that we're feeding back to them utilizing digital channels? Does it always have to be about financing? No. Maybe it can actually be about tips to grow the businesses, tips to deal with the issues that they face on a day-to-day basis, things that speak to them directly without going straight to the financing until such time where they're a bit more comfortable, and then you start introducing, if you will, the financing part. And even at commercial bank level today, that's exactly what we talk about too, right? Women they open the bank account, but they don't take loans. They're too afraid of what that means. They open the bank account, but they don't put the money in the bank account. So how do you entice them to actually utilizing these services more often so that they can reap the benefit of it? I think at the end of the day, the starting point is really the education.
Thank you so much. May I request a round of applause for Mariam as she makes her way down here. Thank you.